and welcome to yet another session of India Employer Forum Samvaad, our dialogue series where we bring together leaders to reflect on different aspects of world of work. I'm Praveen Koshti, Head of Marketing at Teamlease Services, and I'll be your host and moderator for today. And the conversation we are going to have today is on a very interesting topic, that is leadership beyond titles. And I'm very pleased to welcome Santosh, Mr. Santosh Muddaiah, to our today's conversation. Santosh is a startup advisor and CEO coach. He is independent director, certified independent director from KPMG as well. And before getting into the advisory mode, he was CEO of Nicobar Designs, with a career spanning about 2 decades plus across retail, consumer brands, and entrepreneurships and leadership advisory roles. I'm pretty sure that the conversation today is going to be very fulfilling, as well as there would be immense amount of takeaways on this particular topic. Thank you so much, Santosh, for joining us today.
Hello, Praveen, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm very excited. It's a very interesting topic, very relevant for the day. I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you for introducing me.
Especially for those who are joining us for the first time, Employer Forum is a non-profit community that brings leaders and practitioners as well as policymakers to discuss what can be done for India at 100 in terms of employment, employability, and ease of doing business. And Teamlease is very proud to be the knowledge partner of IEF to run different initiatives of IEF. I'll directly get into the discussions because Santosh, you bring immense amount of experience in leadership and scaling teams and scaling organizations and so on and so forth. So, I would like to understand and know from you what your personal journey has been as a leader. How have you grown from, starting your career to becoming a leader and CEO of, say, Nicobar in the past?
Sure. I began my career way back, in fact, in the last century, so to speak, in 1990, when I started working with Onida, Neighbors Envy, Owner's Pride in those days. My shift to retail happened in 95 when I joined Levi's, then a new company that's just entered India. We didn't have the word startup those days, but it was, in a sense, a new business. That was my very exciting shift from consumer business to retail business, and I stayed in retail since then. I've been about 25 years in retail, worked across lifestyle, grocery, cafe, electronics formats in different kinds of companies, both Indian, multinational, and startups. In my last two roles, I was CEO at 24/7 Convenience Stores, it's a grocery business, and CEO at Nicobar Design, which is a lifestyle business.
How your definition of leadership has evolved in different, one from last century to this century, from this century to this century, pre-chat GPT, post GPT, to, different functions and industries. How has it evolved as an individual for you?
Okay, I'll take that question in two parts. One is the transition into retail. I see retail as a very high people-intensive business, because when you're at the front end and you're managing dozens of stores, mostly remote, who have their day-to-day operations and challenges in the environment, they're facing customers every time, versus a consumer-facing business or a consumer brand business where you're really depending on the network. You make the product, you place a product, you promote it, and then you wait for customers, and someone's dealing with the customer. So I see retail as a very high people-intensive business. And that is quite an exciting thing for me because I love being around people. So that's the first part of your question. The second part actually is a brilliant one, and I've been asked this many times. There has been a very significant transition in retail. The early retail, the days when brands like Titan came up, Louis Philippe Van Heusen came up, which was the early decade of this century, was when there was a lot of experimenting. We were moving, for example, from tailoring to ready-mades. From eating changed from, typically what mom and grandmom said to, manufactured processed products. So, and more organized retail, from the kirana to organized retail. So there was a distinct shift in the first decade of the century. The second decade of the century, which is 2020, saw the entry of multinationals, the likes of Walmart, where the formats got more crystallized. A lot more systems and technology came into retail. And that decade also saw the genesis of e-commerce, when the early days when Flipkart set up, Amazon set up, and so on. The last decade, which is partly the COVID decade, was where the question was raised that will physical retail survive? Will e-commerce destroy physical retail? And after COVID, we've seen a lot of digital native companies enter retail very strongly to set up presence, to get more touch and feel of customers, voice of customer and all of it. So it's an interesting transition. I think at the end of the day, it's not about who's going to survive or who's going to last longer. It's about how well retail companies have adapted, how well they've adapted to change and how resilient they are, acceptable they are to new things, new development. So today we see a balance. I think today we are saying a kind of, I won't say harmonious balance, but a balance between different formats of retail. There is physical, there is website, there is marketplaces, and so on. So it's constantly evolving.
So basically, Santosh, we just touched upon your own career progression, and you talked about you having seen Kirana stores getting into more formal and organized store, and from there to e-commerce and now quick commerce. You yourself have been very people interactive kind of leader over a period of time. How have you seen this transition in organizations from people to technology? Plus, in customers also, that clients are the shoppers, so to say, for retail instances. They have also become so tech savvy that they are not just in the store talking to people, but they are interacting with a brand on their app, completely in impersonal interaction. How do you see, leadership evolving in this particular case? Plus, what are the changes that have come into running an organization from this perspective?
See, whether businesses have or industry has moved from kiranas to organized or manual to technology or whatever, right? At the end of the day, I think a leader is known not only by the results he brings, but how he has built his team, how he has developed his people into a resilient culture. So today, a lot of the senior leaders today are the ones who have seen these 3 decades, like I told you. But the ones who are successful are the ones who have been able to kind of build their talent, groom their talent, enable them. It's not about, remember that when you're a functional specialist, you're a leader of, let's say, HR or sourcing or something, then you know that function very well. Yeah. But when you go into senior leadership like a CXO or a CEO, you are a generalist. Okay. So you need to build influencing skills. You need to build skills that help you empower, enable the teams, right? What doesn't matter there is how much you know, but what matters then is how much you enable your people to take decisions on, take risks. Do you have their back? Do you celebrate taking risks? Do you forgive mistakes? A balance of that. One is not saying you need to be soft, but how well you are able to balance results or a performance metrics versus psychological safety. One of the things that I used to do is when I was a CEO, I would not tell people or give a message that, hey, I know the answers, I'm going to take a decision. I will let the room have its voice in terms of its specialists and then come to a decision. So therefore, it doesn't matter what's happening in industry, whether consumer, technology, or whatever else. It's about how the leader is enabling his team.
So, Santosh, if I try to, take one takeaway from this, what I understand is we are talking about leadership being one way of leading the teams, irrespective of whether it's a tech-enabled organization and function or business, or it's a product company such as an Onida, or it's a retail company. Is it, am I summarizing right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But still, in last 30 odd years, do you still say that, there is something that you unlearned as a leader, or still, your beliefs have been held there and, you're building on top of that, or there were some things that changed over a period of time?
I think I've unlearned control and I have learned influence. So when you're developing across levels of leadership, like I said sometime back, you are a functional specialist and you become a generalist, right? You're a specialist and you become a generalist. When you're working with different functions versus working only in a sales function, for example, when you're working with different functions, the thing that you need to develop is how you can influence across silos for the greater good.
Correct.
So then it's no longer about how a typical department head says it. I didn't do my sales target because there was no customers. It's about being proactive to say, how do I work with my marketing so that I don't get to a situation where there are no customers. It's
Got it.
about how do I influence across functions. It's about how do I, yeah, okay, in a collaborative way. I've unlearned control and I have learned collaboration. I have learned influencing. Yeah. I have learned that compassion is a better way of doing things. Compassion is today seen as being soft. Okay. It is true that leaders, people with checklists and who are constantly chasing, get more voice, are more visible, and are perceived to be doing a lot more. Whereas the people who are leaders who are reflective, who are nurturing teams, who demonstrate some kind of empathy, compassion, are seen as passive. But actually, that's not true. A good leader is the one who balances performance metrics with psychological safety, like I said, which is compassionate leadership. This is not letting go of results. This is not saying it's okay if you don't achieve your sales target, but it is saying that to achieve your sales targets, how can I help you?
Got it.
Yeah. So a good leader is not one who's just driving results, but who is enabling people to deliver their results.
Understood. So, Santosh, I was just checking that you have given a nature-based analogy from lions to wolves to
Yeah.
explain high-performing teams. So, how can leaders translate these metaphors into real everyday organizational practices? I mean,
Right.
see, at times understanding some things are easy, but if you give an example of, this is how you should do it, it becomes easy for people to follow. So, can you
Hmm.
please share some examples or your own experiences and stories? It would be a great help.
Sure. That's a very interesting analogy of different types of animals. And you'll notice that each animal that I mentioned there, whether it is the geese or the ants or the lions, has a certain role in the nature. They do certain they live in certain places, they do certain things. And the way they live, the way they lead, the way they are with each other is very unique to that particular species. Now the human is more evolved. Yeah. Human in his day-to-day life will probably experience different kinds of scenarios, unlike a animal, which is very typical scenarios, right? So the learning that I had from that study was, as leaders, we need to be able to adapt different behaviors in different situations. For example, the goose, okay? You'll notice that when a flock of geese are in the air, the geese that is leading, okay, after maybe 100 miles of flying, goes back and gives another one a chance. So that's like rotational leadership. In a pride of lions, the lion does not hunt, the lioness hunts. The lioness will never say, I will hunt alone, and all the other lionesses wait and watch. No, it's always a group activity. So, similarly, in an organization as well, a leader should have the resilience to say, hey, you know what, I do not know how to do this work. Okay. I'm not the best in the room. Okay. So, I need someone to help me out. Okay. There has to be role clarity. Okay. But at the same time, there has to be resilience as well. Okay. So good leader. Now, what do I learn from this? A good leader is one who enables feedback, who is humble and open enough to say, hey, give me feedback on how I manage the situation, both from his peers or from his team. Okay. A good leader is one who sets review cadence, sets performance metrics, sets review cadence, and then gives feedback to improve. A
Yeah.
good leader is one who plays, like there's a quote, play the horses or race the horses to the courses, which means that if you have a certain person who's skilled at doing something, let go of your position and let that person do their job. So this is what I've learned uh, from that. Oh, there's one more thing. It's about taking risk. The risk has to be respected. And mistakes have to be allowed. And it is not important to be fully prepared, or it's not important to get everything right. And that's what happens in nature. Nature is not always predictable. So likewise, neither is corporate work. So a good leader is one who can learn from these different kinds of behaviors and adapt himself differently to different situations without losing predictability. You cannot suddenly become something else. But the team should know my leader is behaving differently now because he does not know how to do this work. So I need to step in. My leader is calm, like the elephant example. He's calm in whether it's a breakdown or a problem, he's calm because he's giving the team time to recover and act again. So these are little subtle signals that we can learn from the animal kingdom how they operate. how elephants behave versus snakes. There's so much to learn over that. So that was the analogy that I tried to bring in that example.
Wow. In fact, when you're, taking these examples and analogies, I was thinking about, say, for example, a founder whom you are advising. So, my line of thought moved from that direction, that you have been a retail expert and D2C brand leader to now advising founders. So my question is more about what is one strategic decision or strategic approaches that you believe can make or break organizations' growth, uh, maybe for consumer focused companies, or maybe for the founders.
See, having worked in a couple of startups recently, the one thing that, and I found that in my recent advisory roles as well, and this is specific to startups, since that's the question. The founders do a good job of taking charge of recruiting the right people, because the founder has got the idea, he knows what that brand stands for, he's got his hands on the soul of the brand and so on. So therefore, so that part works, right? So the first set of leaders is selected, and he or she brings them together, and then they get going. But remember, at the end of the day, most founders are not experts in people. Okay, they are experts in defining the product or service, in addressing customer needs, evolving the product or service. That's their core, right? So that's where the gap is. I think I would call it in managing human capital. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And most founders reach the fork in the road where the leadership or the team is no longer capable of building scale. Okay. Because the founder was, after he put the people together, probably got busy with customer and scaling and funding and all of that stuff. But how do you knit these specialists together into a cohesive team who can work together towards the founder's goals or the business goals? And can't blame the founder for that. You can't expect the founder to be everywhere and doing all the things. The human capital challenge comes because there's a delay and a postponement in choosing the head of HR. And HR is seen as a transactional function where you manage all the bookwork and the salaries and all of that stuff and all of that stuff. So therefore, a junior person is kept there to appointment letter and all of that kind of stuff. But when the HR becomes a strategic function, where the head of HR is actually the culture, the custodian of the culture, is able to understand different leaders' traits and see what trait needs encouragement and what trait needs development, so that he can then help the founder in directing the leaders, putting them together, holding the group together towards a common objective. Yeah. So I think the slip happens there, and you will see every business reach a certain stage where there's a sudden stagnancy. It's like a fork on the road. Do I take a left or a right? And suddenly the founder finds that nobody's able to decide. There's no depth in the leadership. Mm-hmm. And this is a challenge. It's not insurmountable. It's just that sometimes the founders let go of how to manage human capital best, how to get the best out of them.
Yeah. So, very interesting point actually. Though Teamlease as a company is in recruitment and staffing, we actually did not touch on that particular aspect. So, whenever we talk to our clients and prospects, we talk about two very key, intelligent, and interesting aspects. One is called attrition cost. There's a cost in attrition, and there's an opportunity cost. If the role is empty, there's a cost, because, say, for example, your employee per revenue. Of course, there are some employees, those who are not contributing directly to the revenue, but otherwise you can put a number across in terms of what is the employee per revenue per employee.
Per head, yeah.
Correct. So what we have realized and analyzed is that as the organizations grow, the number in terms of revenue per employee is also very, very important. And that's where HR plays a key critical role in making sure that right people are hired at right time with right kind of roles and responsibilities. So very interesting point, Santosh, that you talked about. Very quickly, I would want to ask you one more question about, say, people like me, those who are are in leadership but still they're not at top, or founders, those who have just started their journey, and so on and so forth. That what would be your advice to these emerging leaders who want to create an impact? At the same time, there should be, these are my values and these are the ethics on which I'm going to work. So impact without compromising the values. What would be your advice to the leaders?
Okay. Look, I would always put values and integrity first. Yeah. And if you do not have the right values or integrity, then your results will be just temporary. Yeah. Okay. Now, what about value and integrity? Okay. For me, integrity is doing the right thing. Okay. Especially when nobody is watching, or especially when you can get away by doing the wrong thing. Your team is watching you, everybody is watching. So, a leader who demonstrates high levels of his value systems, ethics, and integrity gets that respect, builds trust in the organization. And you know what's most important? When his team shows up in front of him or her, the team is not editing themselves. There is no faking.
Mm.
Okay. They know that this person holds his ground. He's true to himself. I can be myself in front of him because he's himself always, right? When that kind of a feeling comes, then you know what people do? Okay. They do work for each other. They make sure that it's not just them, but the ones sitting next to them are also successful. Okay. They do it because they want the team to look good and work. They want their leader to look good, and they see a benefit in that. Okay. A good leader is one who is not driving results, but is enabling his team to deliver results by
Correct.
building an environment of trust, by building an environment of safety, and also encouragement. And I should not be coming across as soft by constantly talking about trust and safety and all of that stuff. But I'm saying
Yeah.
that's the foundation. People leave organizations because of the leader. We have heard that many number of times. What's the meaning of the meaning of that is, does the leader have values and integrity that he protects? Does the leader protect other people's values? Does he create a system of trust, safety, and development so that every person in the team can thrive? Think of this as a soccer team. Should the leader be always chasing with the ball, or should the leader be a midfielder who knows what's happening on the defense side and the offense side and is constantly regulating his resources, is coordinating from the middle? I think a midfielder approach is best because he's not the best goalkeeper, he's not the best striker, he's not the best defender, but he's the best game maker.
So, I mean, it sounds like your analogies are very very practical. I have been a footballer myself,
Okay.
in my school days,
Right.
and I remember my first job when I was in Delhi. So my brother took me to his office soccer team,
Right.
and I was told that, okay, where do you want to play? I said I would play wherever the team needs me. And within 3 seconds, we scored a goal. I just joined in, I created spaces, and within, 3 seconds may be an exaggeration because I didn't have the watch with me, but within no time. And I could, very well relate to the point that you're talking about, that
Yeah.
you're not necessarily the best of the people, but you are making the best of the games with your
Yes.
resources. That's, phenomenal. And I can personally relate to it very much. Santosh, one very important question that I would want to ask you, and that is, we are talking about leadership, we are talking about evolution in technology and so on and so forth. Now,
Hmm.
be it, COVID actually changed everyone to a great extent. Now, ChatGPT is changing the way we are talking in organizations, be it, okay, automate it, do some agentic AI and all those things. There are some things that we are not talking about in the organizations, be it boardrooms, be it teams, be it, within friends. So,
Okay.
do you see that that kind of is becoming a blind spot, and we should be, having more conversation within teams, within organization, or with boards?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the answer can never be a no, right? It has to be a yes, but it's the question of how, right?
Hmm.
So here's a situation where, let's say, for instance, there is a sourcing manager, yeah, and the sourcing manager is having a review with, let's say, the CEO or the head of merchandising or whatever. Typically, a sourcing manager's KPIs would be cost, timely delivery, which is called OTIF, at least in garments. So cost and OTIF, that's what is typically the goals, right? So when you come to a review, right, you already know what's the cost and what's the OTIF. You know the numbers already. But the point is, what are you discussing? Are you discussing, for instance, why have you not achieved this cost? Or why have you not brought the product in time? Or are you discussing what worked and what did not work in your planning and execution and discussion with the vendors? What is the conversation? Now, when the leader makes the person, the sourcing manager in this case, open up and talk about the how and not the what. The what is a number that everybody knows. That's there
Correct.
in the data, that's there in the ERP. Everybody knows that, right? But it's a how. Okay. If you've done something right, how did you go about it and what happened right? If you've done something wrong, again, how? And what have you learned and what's the correction and what's the time required? And therefore, in doing so, you're encouraging that person, whether he's done a great job or not done a great job, to reflect, to take a pause, to reflect and bring into the discussion the qualitative aspects of his work. Then that person knows that this leader is adding value and it's not just a tick box activity of doing a review, having a discussion and going. But there is actually a discussion. There's an understanding of what that person is doing, how that person is doing, why he has done well or not done well. At the end of the day, manager, so sourcing manager's head, may not know the job, may not have all the answers. And it's okay. But because the sourcing manager was asked questions in such a way, he was able to think for himself and come back with answers. So that's an enabling way of doing things. I do not know if that gets the question right, but that's how you do it. That's how you bring those discussions to a level of productivity.
Yeah. So basically talking about performance plus ability to improve from there on. Otherwise, elephant in the room is there and nobody's, talking about it. What I'm taking from this is reflecting and qualitatively learning that what worked, what didn't work, and how do we improve from there on.
It's asking the right questions, no, Praveen?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the leader's job is not to provide the answers. The leader's job is to ask the right questions. Okay?
Yeah.
Ask the right questions even if the going is good, because business is cyclical. The going is never good always. Okay. So if the going is good, ask even tougher questions because you have to sustain the good terms.
Okay.
So it's about asking the right questions. Because then that person who is answering or listening, his takeaway is that this person is getting me to think so that I can be better at my job and not being directional or prescriptive. A leader's job is not to give prescriptions. He's not a doctor. His job is to ask the right questions so that that person finds solutions for themselves. So a leader is a coach, not a doctor. Dravid never played for Rohit Sharma. Yeah, that's the way.
Got it. Very important. I actually, again, a very good analogy. Leader is not a doctor. He is a coach. So
yeah.
Very interesting. In fact, I've taken notes of some of the things. One final question that I would, Santosh, very interesting discussion. I just don't want to conclude this, but in the interest of time, I would ask one very important last question, which is about, at IEF, we keep on talking about India at 100. Yeah. So we want to be a $35 trillion economy from what the government wants to reach. And it is not going to happen in isolation. There would be people needed. There would be technology that would enable us and the way we have to use our resources, right? So, because you have been working with leaders and leaders have to actually use the resources to the fullest, what would be one message or one lesson that you would want to take or talk or discuss or share with the leaders for the next decade? No, it's okay.
It's a very good question, and I can see, given all the thing that's happening around us, it's the uncertainty. It's a good question, but I'll tell you what, whether it's uncertainty or not, this question is valid, and we should not amplify over uncertainty as a problem, but as a reality. Besides what I've just told you about a leader being responsible for people and under his charge, like I said, not being a doctor but being a coach, every leader should realize that every individual, when they are going up the ladder, that there are certain behaviors they should let go and certain behaviors they should adopt as they rise up the ladder. Yeah. Like I said, a person who is a functional expert needs to build influencing skills like that. So there are skills or baggage, I speak, that leaders should pick as they grow. In a CEO level, what works best is when you are hiring right, when you're grooming them right to the role and making sure that you are creating a succession plan. Leaders' role is to create more leaders. If that is an approach that every leader takes, say, hey, you know what, I got a team of 7. Can I replace myself in the next X time? Then the leader is thinking, hey, how do I build talent? To build talent, you necessarily have to take risk, have to let go. You cannot be prescriptive in decision making. You have to allow for new ideas. You have to be a better listener and so on, right? So I think one key message for leaders as they grow or for individuals as they become leaders is what will you let go of in your behavior and what will you add in your behavior? For instance, are you going to become a more reflective person? Are you going to become a better listener? Okay. Do you listen to respond or do you listen to understand? Okay. Are you always giving direction, or are you letting people come with direction? So there is a behavioral shift. That's the one key takeaway. When you do that, then succession planning also happens, because then you are grooming other leaders. Then your team is looking up to you and say, hey, you know what? I've got a great leader. What can I do to become like that person?
Yeah.
Yeah. If the leader becomes self-propagating, which means that, he's constantly looking after himself and saying, okay, I've got to keep getting the accolades and finding the problems, then that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Then you're creating stress in the team.
Correct, correct. In fact, I think I'll have to listen to this answer once again on a personal note because it's very deep. One of the things that I could write it, let go of, and what to add in your behavior. One is that. And are you coming up with directions or letting the team decide the directions and they are coming up and having a conversation with you? I think that's more of reflection and not controlling but influencing in a way. That's what you discussed earlier.
Since you love examples, Praveen, here are
Yeah.
two. Yeah. If you are a person who loves the mountains, the baggage that you'll carry for a trek to a 10,000-foot mountain is different from the baggage that you'll carry to an Everest base camp. You can't have one size fits all. But to do Everest base camp, you have to first do the 10,000-foot mountain. So that's the scale of leadership, from the base to 10,000 foot to 20,000 foot to 28,000 foot, right? So there are things you let go in your baggage, there are things you add into your baggage.
Correct.
Another example, and people love cricket. Two brilliant examples. Virat Kohli and Sachin Tendulkar both were captains of their team. Both let go of captaincy. They thrived under the new captain.
Correct.
Yeah, they thrived. Yeah. So what does that mean? Sachin is a great batsman, not necessarily the best captain. Virat Kohli is a good captain and also a good batsman, but he thought that at one point of time he should just be a batsman. So that is your maturity from reflection to say, I want to let go of something. I will focus on something else. That takes guts. That means your ego has to be outside the door.
Correct. Platform.
Thank you, Praveen. Very good, probing questions. Thank you very much. Love talking to you.